Hello and welcome to this video tutorial. In this lesson this is more of a demonstration. I'm going to give you an idea of the units and sizings between Sandbox Max as set for Unreal units and DeleD. So we're here in DeleD right now. And you can't really tell if I deselect everything. I think it's escape. Well, I thought it was escape. Okay, never mind. Deselect all. You can't really tell which one of these is my exported map from Sandbox, where I pulled up one grid size for cube. But when you go over here to the object scene list, click on cube 2. Now you highlight and you can see which one is the cube, and that of course was kind of shown here at the beginning, but I have the grid set over here. To 8 and 1. And I want to show you something. If I go here to Object, you see that this cube at the grid of 8 and 1 in DeleD is set to 16, 16, and 16. I'll show you this in the side view. And that's how it will look. In the side view you have 8 per box. Each major grid line is 8, and in each of these is 1 unit. This is player height in Sandbox, which makes DeleD very tricky to use for mapping for Sandbox, because you can't get the grid any smaller than this to make any details. A box that comes in normally by default in Sandbox, we'll design a cube here real quick, and I'll scroll out and I'll slap it in here, and I'll go over here to the object list, scene list. I'll get it right one of these days, and I scroll up. Okay, this is a cube. Give you an idea what we're dealing with here. Scroll way out. That is a cube of 256 by 256 by 256. The default is, my apologies here. The default is when it creates a cube, it's supposed to be 128, so we'll create a default cube, give you a better idea. This is what you would see by default if you were to create a cube in DeleD. Make it a little more understandable. And I think it's control. There we go. Okay, so this is a default cube in DeleD at 128 by 128 by 128. This would be player height in Unreal Tournament type games. The number, not the actual size here. The number would be player height in Unreal Tournament games, and it would be half the height in Sandbox games. In Sandbox, it is going to be 256, roughly, between 256 and 320. I know this because if I go over here to Max, I have a cube here. I've imported the same mesh that I exported from Sandbox over here into Max. I haven't done any scaling. There's the cube, and you can see the default grid. Well, it's not default. I did change the amount of grid there, but you can see it there. And if I go here to customize grid and snap settings, you'll see that I have this set up 16 and 8. This is what you would use for Unreal Tournament or Unreal Tournament type games. I don't know about the latest version of the UDK, but that's what you would used to use, and as my knowledge is up to UT3, I think. If I go to unit setup, you see that I'm just on generic units. And if I were to draw a cube in here, right over the top, I will do it that way. And you can ignore this bottom number, that's because it's going out beyond where I did it. But it's 320 by 320. In fact, I can even just do this to make it satisfactory. And if I were to take this cube now and drag it over, and go into the 3D view again, and now you see that those two cubes are the same size. So when it exports from Sandbox and is imported into Max, it comes in at 320, which means that designing with the grid in Max set for Unreal, you'd have to double the size of everything to get it to match Sandbox, which means player height is 256 in height. Probably step height will be between 32 and 48, so on and so forth, and I will be doing more tutorials going over this as I learn it later. I just wanted to give you an idea of the size differences. So, I guess our next step is to take it into Sandbox and to show you something there. Hopefully you have an idea now of if you're going to design stuff for Sandbox with DeleD, you're going to need to have the grid set to, as I showed you earlier, 8 and 1, and you're going to want to change this zoom speed here. If you try to do this at the default size that Sandbox has it originally, then it'll be far too large in Sandbox. The DeleD has if you try and use the default DeleD grid settings when it installs, it'll be too large in Sandbox. You can change that, as I showed you in my previous video about the little issue and stuff. I'll go over it real quick here. But you can change that using the scale modifier, and I had this at 4 for a reason, because I want to show you a funky little thing here. Yeah, that was the next thing. So I wanted to show you something. If it will not crash and load. Okay. So I took this cube that I showed you here that came in here at, as you saw, if I can select the cube. This cube here I exported, and this is at 16 units here in DeleD, expecting this to be the same size when I imported it into Sandbox, but there's something funky either going with the export in DeleD, which I would lean more towards because of DeleD's weird units setup. My apologies to the developers, but they really made a strange choice for their generic unit measurements. And it's caused some really interesting things that I've had to try to deal with, but it's either that or it is Sandbox, I don't know which, but I'll show you here in a minute if this will load. I have to exit out of here real quick. So I'm going to exit both of these. And we're going to attempt to load Sandbox for the first, well, no, this will be the second time with the video. I don't know if it'll work or not. It's kind of running sluggish right now. But that's okay, because I am manifesting a new computer for myself right now.